I will call to order the meeting for Wednesday, April 16th. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor Allen,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton,
Present.
Commissioner Kaler,
Present.
Commissioner Crowley,
Present.
and Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
I would like to welcome everyone here in the audience as well as everyone watching or listening at home. We will begin today's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Pastor Greg Hall from Life Mission Church.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Commission, everyone else. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. Join me as we pray. Lord, we're so grateful for this Holy Week that we are reminded of your incredible love for us, demonstrated through the cross of Jesus Christ and then his resurrection. So we celebrate you. And Lord, you did this to demonstrate your love and your desire to bring the blessing of God into our lives. And so, Lord, I pray for this commission. We pray for this commission that also, I believe, wants to make decisions that will be a great blessing to this community. And so I pray for them and for all of the community leaders to hear from you, to be led by you, and to make decisions that will bring the greatest blessing to this community that would cause people to be able to thrive. Thank you that that is what's on your heart, because you are a gracious and good God, and you love us so very much. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pastor Hall. We will move on to public comments. Do we have any registered today?
We do have one.
Okay.
Jason Dials.
Okay, I will read our paragraph here. Subject to the above restrictions, persons who wish to address the City Commission regarding items on the agenda may do so as that agenda item is called. Persons who wish to address the City Commission regarding items not on the agenda and that are under the jurisdiction of the City Commission may do so at this time when called upon by the mayor. Comments on personnel matters and matters pending in court or with other outside tribunals are not permitted. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Any presentation is for information purposes only. The governing body will take comments under advisement. Mr. Dials.
Morning.
Good morning.
If a lot of you don't know me, I'm Jason Dials with Dials Construction. I've been a licensed contractor with the city for over 20 years. Since day one of the city requiring license, I activated mine. The reason I'm here today is I'm a little disgruntled on our permits. This permit in my hand is a deck permit. I turned it in 3/31. Chris did his due diligence and called me April 4th to find out how I was building the said porch. Pretty basic porch, 10 by 16, no roof, no nothing. Simple as can be. I picked up that this permit was ready Monday, 2 days ago. That's 2 weeks for a basic permit. I do anything from foundation repair, home construction, business remodeling. A deck and a smaller job like that shouldn't have to be sent off, and I don't think this one was sent off. My question is, why does it take 2 weeks for a simple permit when I get paid per job? I don't get a weekly check like most people. So if I'm trying to schedule out a job in between, like a smaller job like this, hey, I'm going to knock this out between this big project and this project, have some downtime. I don't understand why it takes so long, because we have to do the legwork. We have to give you a site plan. We have to give you measurements off the property lines, the streets, everything. The nice thing about the city is they have a little system that they can pull up the aerial photo. They can click on that, get the property line. So I don't understand why there's a holdup on a porch. That's why I'm here. It's quite aggravating when you get paid per job and you can't schedule things because of the city. Then you get customers mad. You lose jobs, you lose money. I mean, I would be all for keeping track of the time that I lost and bill the city if the city wants to pay for it. but I don't think you guys want to. I think the system's broken and we need to fix it.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. Was that?
Yeah,
everything? Okay,
I mean,
okay.
it's been
Sure.
roughly a 2-year downfall.
Yeah, sure. Rather than putting anybody on the spot, I'll get back to you if that's okay, but we'll look into this and see kind of what the process is and where it might be. So,
Okay.
I have a question, actually. What do you think fair turnaround time is? Remembering that, I mean, we're people too here,
Yeah, I
and when you
understand.
say you don't want to build a city, that would mean billing all the citizens, because the budget is just our budget, but it's money that has come from
Yeah,
citizens.
I understand.
So what do you think is fair turnaround?
Like, for example, this porch, to be honest, 3 days. That gives you time to review the site plan that we
3
have
business
made.
days or 3 calendar days?
3 calendar days.
So
Or
if you,
So if we turn it in on Friday, by Wednesday of that
Okay, so
following
business
week,
day.
we should be able to have a permit.
okay,
That gives us a little leeway, not 2 weeks.
right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
thank you. We'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay. We will move on to item 7, appointments, proclamations, recognitions, nominations, and public hearings. We have a proclamation recognizing April 20th through 26th as National Volunteer Recognition Week. And this proclamation will be read by Commissioner Kaler and accepted by Ron with our volunteers and police service.
Excellent. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the entire community can affect positive change with any volunteer action, and no matter how big or small it is. And whereas volunteers in Ottawa have undertaken responsibilities that promote the general welfare of the city. And whereas during this week, all over the nation, service projects will be performed and volunteers will be recognized for their commitments to community service. And whereas in providing these services, volunteers have demonstrated a spirit of personal concern and wholehearted willingness to help others. And whereas volunteers are vital to our future as a caring and productive nation. And whereas these volunteers are most deserving of appreciation and thanks. Therefore, we, the governing body of the City of Ottawa, Kansas, does hereby proclaim April 20 through 26, 2025, to be Volunteer Week in the City of Ottawa, and urges citizens to join the effort and celebrate volunteers in our community. By volunteering and recognizing those who serve, we promote unity and fellowship, increase community awareness, and inspire by example, fostering a community of understanding and compassion. Signed this the 16th day of April 2025 by Mayor Emily Allen.
We have Ron.
I'm Ron Hughes, a volunteer coordinator of the Ottawa Police Department. I've been around, as most people know, forever. I've retired from the city after 28 years, and then I started doing this, so I've been with the city like 40 years. We have 14 members of the volunteers, and we start out with McGruff Club. This weekend's a prom walk. We have a bunch of 5Ks coming up. And the Power of the Past and the track and the car show. So we kind of take away overtime from the city so we can step in and take care of what's going on. Thank you.
I just want to add, when I look at this list of names on our agenda here, and if we had to pay all these people to do the services they do for our community, I don't think we could afford it. But it tells me a testament of the people in our community and how willing they are to volunteer for these needs. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to our consent agenda, which includes minutes from the April 9th, 2025 meeting and our agenda approval. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Seeing none, we'll skip over item 10, which is unfinished business. We'll move on to item 11, new business.
Interviews for City of Ottawa Accessibility Advisory Board.
We have a couple of interviews for our Accessibility Advisory Board. It looks like we have 2 openings and 3 applicants. And we have 2 interviews today. And we will start with Andrea Morrow.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Why don't you go ahead to start us off? Tell us about yourself and why you want to serve on the Accessibility Advisory Board.
Okay. So I'm Andrea. I do occupational therapy at Rock Creek of Ottawa outpatient. I actually didn't even know this was a thing until I was on Facebook and I saw that you guys had openings, and making things accessible for people is what I do every day at my job. So I thought, oh, that would be interesting. So I looked at it, and I think that I could be beneficial on the advisory board because of my background and knowledge of accessibility devices, low vision, hard of hearing, things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on to Commissioner Kaler. Do you want to ask a question?
I certainly do. And I think actually you've answered a lot of these with your short synopsis, so thank you.
Sorry.
I'm going to go with the question that I like to ask, and I usually do that at the end, but I'm just going to start at the end and start backwards. Tell us a question that you wish we would ask you about your interest on this board.
Good question. Maybe so answer it with a question?
Well, I just want to know, sure. You can go at Jeopardy style or not.
Okay.
I mean, it's really up to you.
So maybe kind of like what my specialty and accessibility is.
And?
So I spent a lot of time working at a brain injury hospital. And I learned a lot of different training on mobility devices, different widths, different heights, different adjustments that you think would be able to go through normal handicap accessible doors, but don't. So I think that's beneficial.
Thank you.
Commissioner Crowley.
Andrea, good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for applying for this open position, and thank you for your time this morning. So in your adventures throughout town and the time that you spend downtown and just throughout our community, what are some changes or improvements you see that our community might need to make in order to be more accessible?
One thing that I've noticed for our low vision folks is and I don't know if this is feasible or not, but when you go down, when the sidewalk slopes, if it's coming into the street, we have those raised little bumpy things, so people can feel. But I think if we could do some sort of bright paint or something so that someone that's approaching could see before they hit those bumps, some things like that, little things like that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Well, I think you've kind of answered some questions here. By the way, I really appreciate your excitement about and your energy level, so that's always a good thing to see. But just as an outside question, tell us about a good day you had at your current job and why.
Oh, I have the best job. Every day, I feel like every day is a great day because we're helping people get stronger, function better in the community, function better at home. I don't see that there's one specific day that stands out. Every day's a great day.
Good. Sound like you're a good fit for the job. So, good.
And Mayor Pro Tem Clayton, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Again, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
You've kind of already touched on it a little bit. What role do you see the Accessibility Advisory Board kind of serving for the city and the residents?
I don't really know. Like I said, I just kind of found out about this. And what I thought was, I could come to meetings and give my opinions and knowledge the best I can and, help serve the community that I live and work in. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrea. I think that is, Commissioner Kaler asked her final question first, so we're good with that. I think that is all of our questions for today. We do have some other interviews, and then we will get back.
Okay,
And
thank you guys.
Thank you for applying and be
Yeah.
willing to volunteer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on. Oh, we're right on time. We will move on to our second candidate, Nicole Hitchcock.
Morning.
Hello, Nicole. If you want to start and tell us about yourself and why you would like to serve on the Accessibility Advisory Board.
Yeah. Hi, I am Nicole Hitchcock, and I used to be a special education teacher here in Ottawa. I was at the middle school for the Functional Life Skills Program, which supports students with autism and Down syndrome and other developmental disabilities. And I taught for 10 years, and then I was a behavior specialist here in Ottawa for 3 years, and then now I work for the State Department of Education and on a grant-funded project called TASN, which is the Technical Assistant Support Network. And my project is for the students with autism and tertiary behavior supports. So we provide free training to teachers across the state, and then I provide technical assistance also to students with behavioral and other like academic needs that school districts aren't able to support on their own. So I started with a student with Down syndrome when I was 17 at a daycare, and I just passion for helping children with disabilities has just gotten stronger.
Thank you. We'll start this time with Commissioner Skidmore.
Sure, yeah. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you for your work. We have 2 nephews that are autistic. I know that various different levels of autism span, but I'm glad they're in the Olathe School District, and they certainly have succeeded, done very well. And so I'm glad to see people like yourself working in that field.
They have a great program in Olathe.
Yeah, and I've also substitute teach at this. Back today, I taught the first 2 hours at the special ed at the middle school, and so I understand what the challenge it is sometimes to keep their attention level where it should be and finish the task.
That's the fun part.
Yeah, challenging for me, but good for you. Maybe. I'm not experienced with that. But anyway, just tell us about what I like. This question here is, what role do you see the Accessibility Advisory Board serving for the City of Ottawa?
Yeah, I too, like Andrea, I didn't even know it existed until I saw the Facebook post. I don't really know a lot about it. I just know from my perspective that I could bring, what I feel like it could do is bring more support to students with like younger people like with disabilities. And so like, and I don't know if this is part of this board or not, but I've helped several families, at least 5, get supports for their students with autism in the community. So I know it's more about accessibility in the community, but what about access to services too? I don't know if that's part of this board or not. Several of my friends and other people that I know, like their children and grandchildren needing supports for their students with autism, and they don't even know it exists. So to me, I could bring a different light as far as supports for children.
Want to fall through the cracks?
Yeah,
Very useful to our society. Okay, thank you. Very good.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
What do you perceive is the biggest need concerning accessibility in the community?
Yeah. Like I said, I haven't really thought a lot about that because I didn't know this existed. And I myself don't have a disability, so I don't get to see the cracks in the system. But now that my eyes are open to it all, I'm sure I'll find a few. But I mean, and I look at it from the aspect of a child that doesn't speak or doesn't have access to communication and things like that. So like communication boards at the park, things like that, and just being able to, I also see a lot of people, I used to work at COF, so I see a lot of people with disabilities in the stores, and just being able to make things a little bit more accessible, to be independent with things without needing other people to help them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Crowley.
Nicole, good morning. Thank you for showing up this morning and applying for this open position. I was really excited to hear that you had seen the post on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the issues we run into as a commission, is that there are openings like this that people like you and Andrea, with the talents that you have, we could utilize. We could certainly use and benefit the city of Ottawa with, by you guys applying and bringing your knowledge to it. So along that line, I kind of asked Andrea the same questions, and it goes along with what Commissioner
The one on the end.
Clayton, yes, sorry. Commissioner Clayton, it was one of those days, had brought along. You know, you spend some time downtown and you don't really think about it, but have you noticed anything that there might be some improvements or some changes that, you know, downtown businesses could do or the city of Ottawa could do that would benefit people with disabilities?
I don't know if like training around training for businesses around autism and different things like that. I provide training around that, so that wouldn't be hard for me to come up with. I'm also, yeah, I guess just maybe training, because I do have the eye of being able to see, like I knew, like what Andrea suggested about the brighter mark, like I've been trained from OTs, the great OTs here in Ottawa, and so I can see those things. So I'd have to go around the city and kind of tour it and think about that. But right off the top of my head, what I could do is provide training around autism and different disabilities so that people would be more familiar and be able to support them in the community.
And certainly something that a lot of folks could use.
Yeah.
You know, as you're saying, you're a professional and you don't even think about some of those things in your daily life. For us that aren't professionals, certainly don't. So that training would be beneficial. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Taylor.
Well, I rinse and repeat my questions, so.
I anticipated that.
Yes, good, I'm glad. So tell us about, you know, something that we wish you would ask you and what's your answer to that?
Okay. I guess my question would be, why would you choose me? And I just bring a different perspective as far as with children with disabilities. I also see detail in things, and I see the big picture, and so how things really impact each other. And I'm very organized, and I'm actually a board certified behavior analyst as well, and so I have a lot of experience in organizational behavior management and how systems work together and things like that. So I think I could bring a perspective to help not only get accessibility better in our community, but maybe get our why we have, like, I didn't even know this committee was here, and so like just being able to communicate that better and get those things out there a little bit better.
You're talking my social work language here, and I'm loving it. So we can just stay here for a little bit longer and talk more about that. No, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. Again, we have, it looks like one more interview next week, and then we will get back to both the applicants, all three, once it happens. But we are very lucky to have you guys apply, and I'm really excited for the future of this board if it looks like this. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That'll move us on to item 11B.
Review of the 2025 street maintenance plan.
Director Welsh will present the 2025 street maintenance plan.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's fantastic to have folks like that in our community that are willing to come out and serve. I like seeing that. It's good stuff. What I'm going to present to you guys today is a general overview of the 2025 street maintenance plan, and then kind of how we came up with the plan and where we plan on going forward, and what we obtained from the survey or the assessment that we had done last year. So 2024, we hired a company. They came through, they did a survey on all of our roadways, with the exception of our brick roads. So everything asphalt and concrete, we had an assessment done on. They provided us with, we'll get into it just after this slide, but they provided us with an integral map that you see just a still frame of on the right there. And then also on another page, it gave us just a general overview of where our roads are in total on the left on this network score. So from 1 to 5, 5 being the worst and 1 being the absolute best, in total our roads were almost at a 3, so we're at a 2.95. So while it's easy to focus on the terrible roads that we have in town, we also have a lot of good roads as well. So I think that's important to know. The rating system here in the middle of this chart, it shows, like I said, from before 1 through 5. This company also, I had to reach back out to them. They didn't provide it initially, but they provided us with a PCI. So that's pavement condition index report. So each one of these segments, they took their ratings, gave us the pavement condition index, and I think in total they gave us nearly 2,000 different segments. So it's a really long report to decipher. But I've kind of put together what these ratings would be if we were looking at the PCI, and then what the recommendation from that PCI would be on the side there. So anything that's rated a 5, which is going to show up on our map as red, would be considered we need to do some type of a reconstruction for. The 4s kind of hit right. The PCI on the 4, they don't just fall exact, but in general, the 21 to 40 on PCI is the recommendations have some type of mill and overlay done. The 2s to 3s, it's kind of just dependent, but the overview would be we need to do some type of a chip and seal or some type of a sealant on that surfacing. And then the 1s would be don't really need anything, or first step is going to be just make sure that we're taking care of the cracks on that surface. So.
PJ, on that real quick,
Yeah.
What's the gray? Are those roads were those not?
Yes, those are our brick roads.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those weren't part of the.
They were not part of the assessment. Yeah. Probably don't want to know what they would have said about our brick roads. So this is what they provided us with. So this is the entire map of Ottawa. As you can see, we can look at any piece of it. So what we've got checked off here is just the segments they went through. So all of them 1 through 5. So this would get us back to that level that we were talking about. So if we were to just uncheck all of these number 5s, these are going to be the ones that were recommended for complete reconstruction. They've also broken it down too into just points. So these points, you can see that they're just little dots on here. These are what they actually provided us that list with. So there's, like I said, if we were to break these down into individual pieces, there's over 2,000 of them on these maps. So a little harder to look at that way. So what we've done is, well, let me go here. This was the other report that they provided us with. So this was just the overall, this was the same thing that you just looked at. So they're saying that 12% of our roads are in that rating 1 category. So basically these roads are in really good shape. The 2s to 3s, if you remember, were in that PCI index that we would say need some type of a sealant done to them. So there's a pretty significant number of roads that need that type of address. As we move up, the ratings, the 4, that mill and overlay, if you remember, so 13% of our roads need a little bit deeper dive into the construction, and then 15% of our roads are that they're saying need some real work. So they've broke these down into specific pieces of roads, and they've actually labeled them for us if you guys want to take a look at those. But they've given us our list of our residential roads. There's 146 of them on this particular list. It tells us what the individual score for that piece was and how long of a stretch they were talking about. And same thing for our primary, tertiary roads, the secondary roads, and then what they were calling our service roads. Go back to them. So what we did with this map and the PCI index that they provided us with is went through and separated everything out into different categories. So we didn't go with the 1 through 5. We actually went with pavement control or pavement condition index, and we separated everything out that way to determine what type of work needs to be done for each piece of street, and then developed a quote unquote plan to move forward with how to do this. And then based on the information that they've given us, and then just the general knowledge that we have, from our staff and the area within the community, which ones need to be addressed first. So that's kind of where we came up with our plan that we'll move forward with. So that's just a general overview of the information that was provided on these from roadway. If you guys have any questions, I would like to go over that before moving back and forth through the presentation.
Two for you. One, just looking at Ash, I see it's kind of rated a 2 and a 3 between 2nd and 7th. And just thinking that was done that 5, I mean, probably within the last 7-8 years. So just kind of thinking for the future as we start doing more and more roads, what that lifespan should be, because if it's a brand new road within 7 years and it's kind of already in that 3 range, you know.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll cover it a little bit on the next slide, but just because you asked. So we have an outline on what the road, how long the road should last, which typically going to be about 40 years. So, you know, at about 3 years, you would probably plan to start seeing some type of cracks on your, especially on your asphalt roadways. So that's when you're getting into that 2 and 3. Remember, that was like the crack sealing or some type of sealant to help prevent any type of moisture from getting into that surfacing and then breaking, causing all the potholes and all of the, you know, the deterioration of the undersurfacing. So that's why some of that is listed as the 2 and 3. We're probably starting to see those cracks develop, and our process would be we need to go and get that crack sealed, and then as we move forward, look into what other type of sealing needs to be done depending on the year.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Yep.
And then second question, kind of on that, kind of looking at your list in the map, with the street maintenance plan, is that essentially more like you'd say maintenance, where some of these ones that are more 5s would be like capital improvements,
Yes.
replacements? So
yeah, there can be much larger dollar amounts on those 5s.
pavement okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good with that? All right, can we go back to the slides? Go. Yep, so this was what I was talking about, Commissioner Clayton. So as you see, year 3 is when you start to see those cracks develop in new surfacing. So that's when we need to get in there and make sure that we're doing that crack sealing, taking care of those cracks, preventing all that moisture from getting down inside of them. As you move forward, you know, year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're going to continue to do that crack sealing, but at some point during that period, you're going to look at some type of other surfacing or sealant that to just help preserve it as you go. When you get down to that, you know, 12 to 15 year, you're going to be looking at a deeper dive into that. So some type of a rejuvenator that's going to help actually penetrate down into the surfacing and help bond everything back together. When you get up to that year 15, 18, 20, that's when you're going to get a little bit deeper dive into that mill and overlay, which, you know, a deeper dive into the rehabilitation. And then essentially that process just continues on for the next 20 years with that same every 3 to 5, 7 year program to try to keep those streets the best that we can. And then typically after about 40 years, you're going to be looking at trying to replace the surface in the entire roadway. And you can see this would be our plan for 2025 on the side over here. We were looking to do a mill and overlay on a couple of roadways. 7th Street from Cedar to Cherry. It's getting to the point, it's been 20, 25 years since that roadway was done, so it needs to have that surfacing redone on it. And it's one that staff has noticed that it's starting to get into some disrepair, so we want to catch that before it gets out of control. And then from 14th Street, from Main Street to Cedar, the one that runs right there by the hospital, it's getting pretty bad. We need to get on top of that. Some of these other ones that are recommended for chip and seal are following right along that same timeline as what we had talked about before. You know, every 5, 7, 9 years, we need to make sure that we're getting some type of that resealant, and a lot of these have had that done in about that time frame. So that's why that they're on this list again, to maintain them like what our engineer estimate come back for the mill and overlay for these 2 particular segments, $144,000. Chip and seal for the 9 other segments that were listed there, about $142,000, bringing a total engineer estimate of $286,000 that would be funded from the Special Streets Fund this year, 2025. And this is a receive and file, unless you guys would like to push it off for another week. This is what our plan will be for 2025.
What questions do we have?
Just a comment and a question. Now, first of all, thank you for the work you did on Cedar Street. That was certainly needed. That's
Yes.
a quick way to get from downtown to the south end of town, of course, within the speed limit, of course. If anybody's listening.
Everybody drives the speed
Of
limit.
course, of course. All right. But anyway, appreciate getting that done. That was very important. And this list you've given us is very good to have too, so people who live on these streets can know that they're going to be paid attention to.
Yes.
Now, as far as the reconstruction, do we have a list for that, or is that something to be another time, another day?
I do have a list started for that. I'm trying to develop all of the numbers so that way we can make the financial plan moving forward. If you guys would like to see that list, I could provide it. It's a pretty extensive list. As you've seen, 15% of the roadways need a complete reconstruction. But if you would like to see it, I could bring it back and show it to you.
Well, that'd be interesting to see also for the people to know that, our street next year or 2 years from now, at least they know it's on the calendar.
Yep.
And I know that's going to be a lot more money per
Yep.
linear foot on that, of course, but still the same way we've got to do that. And then how do you decide? I mean, I guess with the number coding, I appreciate you getting that study done, but of those ones that are red, how do you decide which ones come first, second, third, and fourth? Is it by traffic count, or we don't have
Yeah.
traffic count?
Some roadways we have a traffic count on, not all of them, but what are the most popular roadways? The traffic count, the ones that are getting us to and from the main roads in town, the ones that are getting us to and from schools, to and from the hospital, those type of ones obviously are going to come first. And then it would kind of just progress outward from there.
Commissioners, if I could, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude to DJ and Chad, who's not here, our street superintendent, really did the work. DJ undersold the work that went in. Really what the company that we're utilizing is primarily a software interface, and you approved that back in 2023 and included annual licensing with that software in our annual budget during the 2024 revised, 25 adopted, about 9,500 a year, and all of the work and the labor and presentation and the aggregation that you saw beyond the bells and whistles was entirely done in-house, because to do a study like this utilizing the exact same software is upwards of 80,000+. So you're getting savings on that from the work that DJ, Chad, and the rest of our public works team does in-house through leveraging an expense of 95 plus, of course, our time. But all of those inputs are done in-house. Thank them for that, and utilizing or creating a process with the pavement condition index, pavement preservation life cycle. So I just wanted to take this time to say it wasn't just them giving us this. There was a lot of work done on our side at a significant savings, and it also gives us that real time and saving that.
Yeah, I appreciate Brian saying that. There's been a lot of time spent on this, as he'd mentioned, not only myself, but several of our staff members. But as you can imagine, going through 2,000 segments and then determining how do we put these in some type of a priority that makes sense, and then tying a dollar amount to them and getting them on a list. It's been a process, we'll put it that way. So I think that I'm fairly happy with what we've come up with. I think it's a good plan moving forward, but I do thank you for recognizing.
Director Welsh, thank you again for the presentation. Great work. A lot of folks are familiar with Cedar, Ash, 15th Street, Wilson, Maine, because that's the roads that are mostly traveled. How many miles of streets do we have in the city of Ottawa? I knew it. That's why I beat you to it.
What they surveyed that they provided us with was 95 miles. And that's not lane miles. That's just the roadway one direction.
Two
So when
lanes,
you're-
4 lanes, so it could be
Exactly.
doubled.
It could
Yeah.
be 4 times
Yeah,
that if
4
it was
times.
all 4 lanes.
So lots of miles
So
of
there's a lot of
roads.
miles.
So
Yeah.
a lot of work to do, certainly.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else?
Well, I actually do have one additional question. Now, I had to thank you for giving me 30 seconds to come up with my next question. I appreciate that. Director Welsh, I love the tool that you used during this about being able to segment like what was of highest need and what's of lowest need. Is that a tool that could be accessible to citizens to look and see how their street may look, and maybe not subtracting or adding, but everyone wants to know what's going on in their neighborhood.
We could, I don't think it could be interactive like what you see. Because
Right.
But maybe a screenshot.
But
of
Maybe
it
we
or
could post the
something.
screenshot of the different segments on our
Yeah.
website so people could get on there and look and see where their road rates. Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
It just wouldn't be interactive like what we just
Yeah.
kind of.
When you add and subtract and but I love the idea of,
Yeah.
of an individual being able to say like, hey, how does it look around my parents' house?
Right.
How does it look around my house? How does it look around my friend's house?
Yeah.
Whatever. And then I'm sure this never happens to anybody else, but I pulled out the pavement management system binder that I was given several years ago, and I had it sitting right by my door, and I was going to bring it because the pavement management system that we did have was a cadre of lots of maps and lots of notes. And this is much more understandable
Yeah.
and much better concise way of looking at how we can make sure that our roads stay up to par. So thank you. And I'm not going to throw that notebook away, but I do think it maybe should go. Maybe I'm Old Depot Museum.
Historical.
Yeah, Historical Society. Maybe they want that. So
Well, I like it that it's outside source and it's objective, and that's what we have to operate from in this bench. And so I think it's a good plan. I'm glad we're doing that. I was kind of wondering, that was my question before we came here today, if we had an update on this when we saw this topic. And so, yeah, thank you for putting that together. And I don't know, and first of all, I also want to say too about the pothole repairs. I thank you for that as well. I know a lot of people have mentioned that, and I appreciate the fact that we have a site where people can report them. I assume that's still active.
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure
Yeah,
people know that.
we went live with the website. People have been utilizing that. We would just ask to continue to do so. They can just appear overnight, and we don't know anything about them unless somebody's reporting them. So we appreciate everybody's help with that. And yeah, the pothole patching is just to continue. I think at this point, even with the ones on Cedar Street, we've done over 100 tons this year.
I appreciate other commissioners asking all the questions I had, so I don't have to ask as many and seem like I'm taking all your time. The elephant in the room, the brick streets. Do we have a thought, a plan to kind of inventory those? You know, just thinking about 9th Street as not an arterial, but probably a secondary road to go from Ash to Main Street, and kind of its condition, and then obviously in the east side of town, those conditions. Do we have kind of a plan for at least getting some information on those, the condition of those, and then figuring out, like you said, a 40-year plan for that?
I think that would be a much larger discussion on how we would want to proceed as a city as a whole with our brick streets. At this point, there isn't an assessment done on the brick streets, not necessarily even the thought to do so. Probably should be done, because you're right, 9th Street, I used to live off of 9th Street. It was not the greatest of shape. But the solution to the brick street problem is a much larger one that would have to be discussed in much larger detail.
Thank you. And then secondarily, you may not know, obviously being kind of newer in your tenure of your position, I remember when I was a kid, our street was a gravel street. It was paved through a tax. I think it was a grant from the federal government came down. Basically, homeowners put it on their property taxes for 30 years. All 4 neighbors kind of paid for it. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the federal government when it comes to funds coming down. Are there any programs or things similar to that you're even aware of where municipalities can work with homeowners? If neighbors come together and they're like, we want our road done, we're willing to help pay a portion. Because I think it was like a 50-50 match. Probably no one's here that was in the 90s when that was done. But
Yeah, you're right. Me being new to it, I don't have a direct answer for
Okay.
that. I don't know if.
Okay.
I don't have a direct answer.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the information. That was very easy to understand, and the graphics were great. And so, yeah, if we can make those in any sort of way available to the public, I'm sure they would appreciate
do
that.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 11C.
2025 Franklin County Housing Study.
We will receive and file a report on Ottawa's 2025 to 2029 housing demand and market conditions as projected by the Next Move Group in the March 2025 assessment for the Franklin County Development Council. We have Director Neese.
Good morning, Commissioners and Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I have a pretty short, high-level presentation for you on the Ottawa portion of the housing needs analysis. This is a 5-year view, and as you stated, the request is that you would receive and file this. So it's important that we have a housing study for a couple of reasons. One is that it provides actionable information to city staff, to you as commissioners, and then to the development community. It's also a necessity. It's essential for both grants and for economic development tools with the state. We have to have one that's from within the last 2 years. So it's a 2-year. We have to do this every 2 years, and it has a 5-year window then. And the study before you was completed by the Next Move Group for FCDC, and we really appreciate the work that Paul Bean did on this. And we do anticipate having Paul come in and giving a fuller presentation in the near future and kind of zooming out. We're going to just look at the Ottawa data, but I assume that Paul would zoom out and look at the countywide as well. A little bit of background before I go to the numbers. So we had 44 new home permits last year. Last week at the Planning Commission meeting, there were 56 homes that were on the agenda. Only 30 of those were on the action agenda, but 56 homes on the agenda. So exciting opportunities for growth. Again, just real high level. Here's the numbers from Next Move Group. So at the lower end of what they considered, 200,000 to 275,000, or 800 to 999 a month. Those the same sorts of units, sale and rent, a total of 70. Then 275 to 349, and the associated rentals as well, 70. And then they project even more in that next move up than the 350,000 to 450,000, for a total of 344 new homes over the next 5 years. And that would be an increase from 44 last year. This is more like 65 a year, but that's not 344 sounds like a lot, but moving from 44 to 65 doesn't sound as aggressive. And the question internally then is, can we accommodate this growth? So Scott and I have both looked at that, from a utilities perspective and from a land within the community. And yes, we believe we can accommodate this without any problem, certainly on the utility side. We don't have financial considerations for you at this time, or legal considerations, and this was just for you to receive and file. And happy to answer any questions you might have. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Neese. And on questions, I know, Paul, you're here, but if you'd rather kind of have more questions at another time on that, we kind of work through, because one of my questions was looking at this. It says 34, new homes in the 200 to 275 range, and then in that same chunk, it has that rent at 800 to 999 a month. There are several people in this room who build and rent houses. I do not believe those are the same houses. I do not think a $200,000 to $275,000 house is the equivalent of an $800 to $1,000 rental. And so I'm just kind of curious. Later when you come back, I can draft up a bunch of questions, shoot them over for when you come back. Sorry, on that. So if that works better to just kind of do that, to receive file today and then create questions,
and we may even, I don't want to speak for Paul, but it may be even that we want to go back to the authors of the report. I appreciated your comment earlier, Commissioner, about the importance of a a third party and that viewpoint, and I appreciate that third party viewpoint on the housing study as well. The other thing that I neglected to say in my presentation, if I may, is the important role that the development community plays. This is not, the city does not go out and build houses in Ottawa, Kansas. This is really driven by the development community, and we appreciate the work that they do to provide housing. So.
Any other questions?
Director Neese, I know you mentioned land. Where would you think that we could put 344 houses in the city of Ottawa?
So we maybe a month ago I did that infill presentation, and infill's not the whole answer, but that's 200 homes. If all of that, yeah. There's I think we said 50 acres. And so, just doing a quarter-acre lot.
If the land was for sale.
If the land's for sale, that's
so.
That's fair.
That's the biggest problem that builders are having right now. Is you've got a lot of people out there working their tails off to find things that are for sale, but unfortunately, a lot of it's not for sale.
Mm-hmm. That's very fair, and I think that's sort of the same question that we would run into when we look at green sites, greenfield sites. Is that it's easy to look at a map and go, yes. It's there. Is it for sale? What are any of the obstacles to development? But so yes, there is that conundrum. Yeah.
And do you know, Director Neese, you may not on this, or like rent specifically and some of these other ones, is it essentially beds or is it truly a home? Would an apartment complex with 20 units check off 20 of these? Or is it like
I assume it's doors rather than beds. Yes, okay. But we can follow up on that, or yeah.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Was there anything in the report that surprised you?
I think it's exciting to see the perspective of the report and the projected need for projected income growth and projected need for higher homes that would fit a higher income. A lot of the building permits that we are seeing are in that, tend to be in that first tranche. So that was exciting.
I guess if I could, you guys may not, George and Jason, if either of you do you guys have anything that you would add, how we could potentially help people who are actually doing this day to day make this more feasible?
I see. Every weekend.
Thank you. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll follow up with lots of questions, it sounds like, and then perhaps a future presentation by FCP DC Director.
Do we have a date on that? Do we have a date on the? Okay.
Whenever.
But we could schedule that soon, I'm assuming. Great.
We will move on to item 12, comments by our city manager.
Thank you. And I want to start off by apologizing to Paul because we were trying to schedule a meeting tomorrow and he's on vacation. So the assumption was if you're in the middle of the week, he's out this week. So I wanted to just apologize for that. We have two big shows coming up at the OMA. You saw these last week. We've got the Taste of Ireland, which is Friday, and I think there's a bigger Irish dance in Kansas City on Saturday, I believe, following this. So you can really get your Irish dance packed in for the regional area if that's something you're interested in. And then also the Murder on the Disoriented Express dinner show. Who doesn't love a good mystery? Wanted to just highlight that this past Saturday was our first airport fly-in and explorers breakfast with approximately 230 attending, and they served breakfast to 183 folks and raised almost $1,630 and had 16 aircraft not from our local airfield fly in for the event, and ask that you save Saturday, May 10th. It's the second Saturday of the month from 8 to 10 a.m. If you're able to attend. And then it is part of the annual prescription drug turn-in, and that will be April 26th. And our police department will be taking your expired or no longer needed prescription drugs for disposal, and that can be done from 10 to 2. And we ask that residents do this rather than flushing them. I know that may be tempting, but that does cause and can cause issues, particularly when it's done in volume for our wastewater treatment and meeting those numbers. So it can cause some unintended consequences there. But we will have that from 10 to 2 on April 26th. And we're looking at next week's meeting with our monthly financial report, our active projects, our quarterly reports, and we'll have tentatively scheduled a resolution for proposed RHID district for Northeast Village, and continuing with our board vacancies from our citizen servants. With that concludes my presentation to you, unless you have any questions for myself or another member of the team.
I kind of had some questions that we've been fielding, or I've been fielding, and I was going to see if we could have a discussion maybe with our city attorney, perhaps with you, whoever wants to answer these. But I know on social media and just people reaching out in general, questions about proximity park and what that kind of looks like.
Yes.
So one of the things I had been seeing was that, you know, some specific businesses, like if we said Kubota in specific, had looked at Ottawa, and that we either turned them down or they turned us down, or can we get some clarification on kind of what that story was and the rationale behind that?
And we're lucky that City Attorney Finch has been involved intimately in all levels of this project, at various levels of elected and staff, from quite literally its inception. So,
yeah. Commissioner Clayton mentioned the Streets project from many years ago and asked, is there anybody here from the 90s who remembers that? And I was a city commissioner from 97 to 2001, and then worked in economic development in the late 2000s. So I remember well when Kubota looked at Ottawa. It was back in 2014. They were looking at sites, kind of if you'd drawn a circle out from the new intermodal at Edgerton, they were looking at sites within range of the intermodal. That was very important to their operations. They actually sent a site team out to Ottawa. We met with some of their officials. I know they met with other communities too. Our finance director was working at another community in the metro, and I know they were also included in that list. We went all in on that presentation. I actually learned some Japanese for that presentation. I've since forgotten it. But they had representatives from their facility in Georgia and from their home office in Japan who came here. They loved the site. And you got to remember, at that time, Proximity Park didn't have had gravel roads, and the utilities had not been extended. But we went out there and did a site visit, and they loved the site. We were actually named one of their finalists for their project. They wanted the whole park, which was exciting because we hadn't even gotten the utilities and roads in, and they were here with somebody willing to look at taking on all of the acreage, and so we were very excited by that project. They announced in late 2014 that they were pressing the pause button and holding off for a while on the expansion project in the Midwest. They did lease some warehouse space up in the North Point development in Edgerton for a parts warehouse. And then that was kind of the last we heard from them for a while, until they announced that they were going to build their new production facility and combine it with their warehouse operation up at North Point. Of course, we were saddened by that news, but it makes sense given that proximity to the intermodal was one of their highest priorities for their facility, and being able to ship in and out on the rail line there at the intermodal was pretty critical to them for their operations. So we're happy to see that that is still a regional net gain. You think about economic development as a regional game. So they're close by, which is good, and I'm certain that we probably have people from here in Ottawa who work there. But we definitely would have loved to have had Kubota and went all in to try to get them. And as Paul can attest, that's the nature of the economic development game. You go out there and you try every time you have a good business interest in your community. That was certainly one of them.
I have more questions, but someone else might have.
Yeah, I think one that I kind of had in this was, obviously one of my first times I'm an economic developer, kind of being in the process. Could you kind of go over even a 30,000, 10,000 foot view on how these typically progress from initial contact, maybe Paul or Commerce, to actually signing a contract for a sale?
So they're all a little bit different, but they're all similar in that the name of the game changed probably 15 to 20 years ago, and companies started using site selectors. We started to see that come up more often, that the company itself might not do the initial winnowing down. It might hire a third-party consultant to do that. And they will talk to the company. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be in the Midwest? Do you want to be near a rail line? Do you want to be near an airport? What's important to you in terms of locating your facility? And then they will work with real estate professionals to create a list of sites. I will tell you, just like any process that you go through where you have multiple options, they're eliminating options before they make a selection. If you don't have this, and you're not within so many miles of a railroad, or within so many miles of an intermodal, or so many miles of an interstate, you're off the list. And so their job, at least initially, is to bring a bunch of sites in and then start eliminating the ones that don't fit the criteria for the business. Those leads, then they don't come to us until relatively late in the game. They've done a lot of that. They've narrowed sites down, and then whether it's the Kansas City Area Development Council, which we have worked with, or whether it's the State Department of Commerce, they will usually take point on bringing a prospect to the community. And you'll visit with them. They might bring in representatives from the company, like we talked about a few moments ago, and then they will look at the site. If they make a decision, there's often an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Confidentiality is very important to these companies because they don't want their competitors to know where they're going to locate a factory or a warehouse. And so it's very critical for them in the initial stages that information be confidential and not spread around, so that they lose a competitive advantage over the rest of the industry. They will then do their due diligence and kind of narrow it down to finalists, like we just talked about. Ultimately, they may issue an option to purchase ground. They may issue a contract request. They may want to actually decide, hey, this is where we want to be and we want to purchase. And then depending on whether it's a private seller or a public seller, the negotiations about the sale of the land take place, and then they enter into a contract. Obviously, private sellers have an advantage in that it's easier for them to do confidentiality. It's easier for them to negotiate privately, which is what the businesses would prefer. When it's public, ultimately that decision has to be made publicly, and a vote on a contract to sell ground owned by the public has to be done before the people and in an open meeting. So once that takes place, the due diligence is really, it then turns to zoning matters, utility matters. Can we put this footprint on this site? And they begin to work through those things. And usually these contracts have a rather long executory phase. When you buy a house, it might be 30 days or 60 days before you close the transaction. When you're dealing with industrial development, it's often much longer, 180, 270, 360 days for them to do all their due diligence and make that determination. So for example, the project that we're talking about now, we're in that second part of that due diligence phase. There's a contract. It has not been closed. The company is doing its due diligence and making sure the project can go forward. they're interfacing with our Community and Neighborhood Services Department to make sure that the permitting and planning can all be done to their satisfaction and meet their needs. And if all that works out, then the transaction would be closed and then development would begin. So that's kind of a high-level view of the process. Paul, do you have anything that I missed?
On that, could you just quickly kind of roughly expand what is due diligence? For folks who aren't familiar with real estate parlance or any of that, like what would that be?
Sure. So if you wanted to liken it to something many of us have probably dealt with, when you buy a house, you might get a home inspection. You want to know if the improvements on the property are good. You might have a survey done to say, are these really the property lines? If you live out in the county, you have a septic inspection done to make sure that still works. And so just take all that and scale it up. And that's what you get with industrial development. Are the property lines right? Are we buying what we think we're buying? Are the utilities there? Can they serve the needs that we have? Maybe it's a high volume water user and they need to know that they can get a certain number of gallons per day. You heard Director Sneathen talk about what our plant can produce and how much we can treat. They might be a high electricity user and need to know, are there enough megawatts available? Or do we have to bring power to the site, or do we have to do something on our own? So all of those kinds of questions. And finally, permitting. Can we build what we want to build here? And if there are modifications that need to be made, for example, you look up in Edgerton, you see a lot of tilt-up buildings, right, where the concrete walls are poured on the ground and then lifted up into the air, as opposed to metal buildings. And if you look in our North Industrial Park, you look at American Eagle's a perfect example of this. You can see the old warehouse, Ottawa 1, that used to be an our own hardware warehouse, and how it was built, metal buildings, maybe lower ceilings, and then you look at the new building. And you see a lot more concrete in the construction. You see a lot taller ceilings, a lot more room for racking systems and moving things around. So as the construction methods change and the uses of buildings change, they want to make sure that they can build what they need to build in order to be profitable.
I just want to expand on that confidentiality, how important that is. And another thing to keep in mind too is, and I've learned this, is that we have a lot of competing communities with us. Florence, Topeka, Kansas City, Gardner, Olathe, Edgerton. And if it got out that this company was looking at our site, we wouldn't want someone like Topeka coming and saying, hey, come look at us. We've got, in some cases, I've heard free land in some situations where they have millions of dollars in their trust fund for economic development. And so to keep it confidential, kept this name and kept these people with us for longer, of course. And I think that's part of the issue why we think the confidentiality is critical in this kind of environment. Anything?
I think that's absolutely true. It's a highly competitive environment. Kansas has some anti-piracy laws, but those don't really apply when you're talking about a new prospect coming in. They apply to, Topeka trying to come to Ottawa and poach, Fashion Incorporated from us or something like that. That's where the anti-piracy laws come in. But when there's a prospect, it's kind of open season. And as you said, one of the big challenges that we've seen in economic development recently is the move towards people giving away land. A lot of cities, a lot of development parks are giving away free land in order to get prospects to their community. And it's somewhat unique that here on the project that is currently under consideration in Ottawa, that you have them purchasing the land at what is essentially a significant value compared to obviously someone offering free ground. But yes, that's one of the reasons confidentiality is important, so we don't lose out on that prospect, and the other is because the business doesn't want their competitors knowing what they're doing or where they're going.
Well, and if I can, to build off of that, so you know how you said some locations are giving away land, and I think some of the citizens would almost view it that we did, making roughly, $5 million on the sale of the land when we had put in this investment. Can you speak to that? How
Sure.
how it is really viewed as an investment rather than a sale and then we're done and we see no future benefits from it?
Yeah, so probably the best way to get to the economics of Proximity Park is to tell you about the history of Proximity Park, and we'll work into it. And I was always kind of a history buff, so bear with me while I tell you a story. It was about 20 years ago that Hill's Pet Nutrition came to look at Ottawa. They wanted to put in a manufacturing plant here that was going to pay, at the time, well above what our median wage was in Franklin County. They were going to bring hundreds of jobs, and they would have been manufacturing jobs. They needed to be near a rail spur, as you might imagine. The raw commodities that go into pet food usually come in rail cars. And they wanted to be in North Ottawa. Another project we were super excited about as a community and really wanted to get here for the benefits that it would bring to our citizens. The landowner who owned the land that they were looking at entered into negotiations, but it quickly became apparent that the property was really not for sale at any price. And ultimately, Hills made a last-ditch offer that was very good, and the landowner said, "No, you don't understand. I'm not selling." So Hills went to Emporia. They took their capital investment, they took their jobs, and they took those wages, and they took them down the road, and now they benefit a community about an hour away. After that, community leaders met with the landowner and said, "Are you ever wanting to sell this property? Because this is probably the most ideal site we have for future development in Ottawa." And he informed them that no, he did not. The city commission in office at that time said, "We do not want to use eminent domain and go against this landowner's wishes. We do not want to use that process. They've made a decision, it's not for sale, and now we need to look at other options." And so Ottawa is constrained by geography, as you well know. There's not a lot of ways to build east and west here, and that's why Ottawa's as long as it is north and south. We now, at that point, knew that north was not really an option. The available land up there was not going to be for sale, kind of like what we talked about with housing this morning. It can be the prettiest site in the world. It can have every amenity, but if it's not for sale, you can't really build on it. South Ottawa at the time was constrained by I-35. There were no utilities underneath the interstate. There was nowhere to build. The economic development group at the time pulled together volunteers, many people who, just like the ones that you honored today, who gave their time to serve on a board. They came together. They retained engineering firms from Lawrence and Topeka. They scoured over 100 different sites in and around Ottawa to try to determine where the best site might be for future economic development. And they used this process very similar to those site selectors that I talked about earlier. Where are the utilities? Where are the access to roads? Where are the access to airports? Where's the access to railroad? And obviously some metrics work and some metrics don't, but after they narrowed down those sites and looked at all of them, the site that is currently Proximity Park was the one that came out on top. The city knew that they wanted to have a voluntary sale from the owners, so they hired outside counsel to negotiate those sales. They were all voluntary. There was no eminent domain used. Landowners willingly sold their property. And the city and county agreed together, entered into an interlocal agreement that the county would put in the road network and the city would put in the utility extensions. But it was not just to serve the land that would become Proximity Park. They knew that if Ottawa was constrained to the north, it must grow to the south. And that meant they needed to open up as much land as possible for development. And so when the voters of Ottawa approved the sales tax for Proximity Park, it was with the understanding that this would be to open up more than 300 acres for development. It would actually open up over 1,600 acres for development south of the interstate. The sales tax was used to be the revenue source for bonds that were used for utility extensions. The county used property tax to support the bonds for the roads, and they went forward with development of the park. The total all-in cost is a little over $31 million. You divide that out by the 1,600 acres that are now made available for development, you get about $19,000 an acre. That would put a sale price for 300 acres at somewhere around $5.8 million. You're selling Proximity Park for $5 million. But remember, you're not a private seller. Private sellers have to get all their equity and profit up front at the time of sale. When you're talking about a community sale, it's a little bit different because there's revenue that comes from selling utilities into the future, water, sewer, electric, broadband, potentially. There's revenue that comes in from sales tax increases. When you have a project that comes to your community, there's a lot of construction that goes on. Those folks stay in hotels here, they buy meals here, they provide extra spending into the economy, and finally you have property tax. It's estimated if this project builds out that over the first 10 years of the project, it would generate between $10 and $12 million in property tax revenue. Remember that the contract that you insisted on not giving 100% tax abatement. In other words, whoever comes to Proximity Park will pay from day one. And so based on those calculations, 10 to 12 million over the next 10 years. And after that, when the incentives are complete, you're looking at somewhere between $7 and $8 million per year in property tax for the city, county, and school district. A quarter of that would go to the city, so about $2 million a year in property tax revenue. Last year, you levied $6.5 million in property taxes to support all city operations. So the economics of Proximity Park are that you might take an $800,000 haircut on the first 300 acres, but you'll make back millions and millions of dollars in property tax that can be used to fund services and keep tax rates low for the citizens as time goes on. And you still have 1,300 acres that are now developable for industrial development, commercial development like retail, and gas stations and service industry, and residential development. When you talk about where can we build 344 housing units, you've now opened up an additional 1,300 acres where all types of development can take place south of I-35. Those are the economics of Proximity Park.
City Attorney Finch, thank you so much for that overview. And the thing is that I think that it's good for us to return back and to remember what has actually happened in the past and to look back. And this was all not done. I know that you've only been up there for just a few minutes, but it's taken years for us to get here. And, you know, there's several of us that have sat up here that have walked those steps with you. So thank you. And there's been countless volunteers that have given of their time, and they don't necessarily, they're not looking for name recognition. They're not looking for anything. They mean just the best for our community. And those are really the people, and I love that we highlighted Volunteer Week this week, because those are the people that really sat in countless meetings and did countless kind of honeydews for our city for years, and now we're finally seeing some proof of that. So I'm also glad that you brought up the half-cent sales tax that we have. Can you, because I know you're a historian, can you give us just a little bit of an overview of how that came into place? And then tell us about when does it expire? And I also want the public to remember that it is a sales tax. It's not a property tax. This is a sales tax.
So in 2015, as we were talking, commissioners at the time were talking, and city staff and county were talking about how we build out Proximity Park, right? And remember, this is right after Kubota's been here and showed this interest in buying the whole park. So certainly getting those extensions done and was a priority. The conversation turned to how do we pay for it. At the time, leaders thought it was best to ask the voters to weigh in through the addition of a half-cent sales tax. That would be what's called a special purpose tax. In other words, it's pledged for one thing. It's not just generally used for city operations. And so that half-cent was put on the ballot. The voters approved it in September of 2015, I believe, at a special mail ballot. And it began in 2016 for a 10-year period. It sunsets next year. In 2026, I believe it's June of 2026, and it will go off. Citizens will no longer pay it. As you said, it's a sales tax, so over a third of it's paid by people who are not in the city, and it does support the bonds. So just because Proximity Park might sell doesn't mean that those bonds are not still there to be paid off. So that's what the money is used for. It was also used to match the $5 million base grant that the city received through federal funds from the state due to actions of the state legislature a few years ago that made possible the water tower that's out at Proximity Park, which is actually going to help all of the city's water system because of the pressure that it can bring from that location. So those sales tax dollars have actually magnified and done much more than it was initially anticipated because we were able to use those to match the base grant and bring in an additional $5 million to our community for utility enhancements. But it will expire, sunset next year in 2026 in June. And the city is not at liberty to undo that sales tax. Legally, that special purpose that's approved by the voters has to be completed. And so we're in the last year of that.
Hey, Attorney Finch, we can backpedal for a second. When you were throwing out all the numbers of the potential revenue that the city would get from Proximity, was that based upon their initial investment?
That's right. That's what the developer has indicated. If they build out their project, which they're doing in several phases, I understand, but their phases are fairly close together. So if they build out the project that they have talked about building, that's what those numbers will be.
Based upon the $400 million initial investment?
Based upon all four of their phases, which will happen, I think they would like to have happen within about 24 to 36 months.
Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to say too, I know a lot of people been saying, oh, we should sell it to these people, we should sell it to these people, whoever. But the thing is, a buyer, we can't go select a buyer. You know, they come to us when they find out we have land available. And so I feel like sometimes that's missed somewhere. I know I've had people say, oh, we should get a warehouse or something. Well, I've driven through Gardner, Olathe. There's empty warehouses now that I would think would fill before anyone even consider putting the building to one here. And so the way I'm looking at it, you know, AI is something for the future, and data centers, and that's going to be something. I'd rather invest in something that's looking forward thinking, forward future thinking, business wise, versus another warehouse that we got plenty in this metro area. So I feel like that's something too. Also, we discussed a long time ago with the county, and we didn't want smokestacks out there. With being on the south end of town, South Breeze, I used to live in a town that had 2 feedlots south of town, and some days weren't too pleasant, so I know what that's like. But at the same time, we wanted to have a responsible business to come, and one that didn't have smokestacks. Another thing I would say too about the selling it for the $5 million versus the investment of 31, $20 million of that was city, approximately 11 was county, if I understand that split.
About 2010, and then a little over $1 million for the actual land acquisition.
Okay.
About 31.3, I think, is what it comes out to.
That was okay. Well, and again, the way I kind of looked at that, when we sell it, yeah, we're not a private entity where you got to make your money on the sale. I kind of look at like a contract for deed arrangement where we got the down payment, and we'll get annual payments for the next 30, 40, 50 years to get our money back. And so, and also the intangibles, like you said, for the jobs, people moving here, kids going in our school district, getting the numbers up. Like I said, sales tax, property tax, so many factors. You know, people complain that our town's not growing. Well, here's an opportunity for us to grow with this investment that Lightfield Energy is making in our community. So I'm looking ahead. I'm looking forward to it. I also want to make sure people understand the decision makers. This wasn't a shoot from the hip kind of thing. You know, we had city manager, city attorney, myself. We had people from the county. We had department heads. Paul was involved. We had a lot of people at the table discussing this since August, and it wasn't a shoot from the hip decision. So I just want to make sure people know that yes, we checked it out, we vetted, and truth be known, we won't know what's the right decision until maybe 30 years from now. But we'd make the best decision we can with the information we have today. I just wanted to pass that on as a comment from this part.
Any other comments? Matt? Thank you. And just one more question, sorry. Can we make this kind of the questions we ask, can we make it into a document that can be accessed?
Right, as part of one of the things that we're doing, and we currently have an RFP out for a web page, but what we are anticipating doing going forward is we have the information already out as a blog post on the city website. So if you were to enter Proximity Park in the search, you would see the original December 19th press release and the frequently asked questions that answer this question.
Okay.
Or that answer many of the questions. And we are also looking at revising that and updating it as well to include much of this and some additional information as well.
Okay. Very good.
Madam Mayor, I'll write that out, and we'll get it to staff so they can include it in the FAQs if anybody has additional
Very
questions.
good. That way we have a direction to point people when.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you know roughly when the 180 days to 170 days, like when's kind of the deadline, for lack of a better term, when people would know?
I think the 180 will run June 18th.
September 11th.
The 270 would be in September.
Okay.
So.
Well, maybe, Madam Mayor, with some of the folks that are probably spreading some of this misinformation, maybe they could just repost the information that our city attorney just gave us. So even on social media, that information could be available.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to comments by our governing body. We will start with Commissioner Kaler.
I had all my comments taken. I'm good. Thank you. No, thank you.
We'll go to Commissioner Crowley.
No comment.
Commissioner Skidmore.
I just want one more time thank all the people involved in making the Proximity Park sale happen. It started way back years ago when the people decided to buy the property all the way up to December signing a contract. So yeah, a lot of people, department heads also here in our city hall helped with put that together. So really thank them for that. I do want to say one more thing, a correction on that. Someone accused me of getting a kickback from Lightfield Energy to swing this deal. I just want to say that's completely false. It's an insult to my character, and I don't appreciate that very much. But yeah, there was no kickback to this person sitting here nor anybody at City Hall.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton.
I just want to thank all of the volunteers. In our agenda, there's a lot of names in there. A lot of names I'm sure that we all are familiar with, people we know, and I always find it's amazing. I don't know how many boards people serve on until you start kind of seeing these things, that you find out that how many people are on multiple boards and serve in multiple modalities to give their time for free to try to help the city as a whole. I want to plug Saturday morning, we're doing a downtown corner cleanup for the landscape, and then as well, we're hoping to get some trash picked up in the alleys, different stuff like that, kind of get downtown ready for when people are out walking since the weather's turning nicer. We're starting at 8 at Haley Park. Following that, and kind of in tandem with that, we're doing an Easter egg hunt for Ottawa Main Street Association with 14,000 eggs hidden downtown. So if you come and you can't find an egg, I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully everyone will be able to find some eggs for that. So we look forward to people coming out for that. And then just want to wish everyone, a great holy weekend with Good Friday coming up and Easter weekend.
The price of eggs, when's that again? I might be there. Okay.
Which ones? The plastic ones or the
Is that
non?
what they are?
Yeah.
Oh, they're-
And
oh, never
I
mind.
do want to shout out on the eggs. The 14,000 eggs came from the Ministerial Alliance. I think it was close to like $6,000 in eggs. So a significant investment by kind of all the churches in town to really work to have an opportunity for children of all ages and socioeconomic, status, that there's an opportunity for them to come and enjoy that as well.
Thank you. And I have no comment, but we will move on to announcements. We have on April 23rd, a city commission meeting at 4 p.m. at City Hall. April 30th, a city commission meeting at 4 p.m. and May 7th, a city commission at 7 p.m. I would move that the city commission recess into executive session at 11:30 for a period of 20 minutes with the city attorney, bond counsel, financial advisor, finance director, and city manager present for the purpose of attorney-client consultation. The justification for the closed session is to engage in confidential and privileged communication with the board's attorney by KSA 75-4319B12. The open meeting is to resume in this room at 11:50.
How long was it for?
20 minutes.
And 11:50 we will resume?
No, 11:30.
11:30.
Okay. Can we just have just a few minutes?
Yeah, we
Before-
have
yeah.
a few minutes.
yeah.
11:30.
I second that.
Okay. We will recess into executive session. Oh,
Yeah.
a vote.
Yeah.
Yes,
Second.
a
I'll
vote.
second. Did we have a second?
We got a second. All in
Second.
favor, say
Third.
aye.
Aye.